Welcome to the Love Story with Lisa channel. Today, we're bringing you a brand new story. The young ladies sipped refined food and drank good wine while chatting happily, everyone beautiful and radiant as 100 flowers in bloom. The court painter painted the scene. The next day the painting was presented to the emperor. The corner of the emperor's mouth curved up to his ears, but he still pretended to scold me. You two are following the Empress Dowager's muddle-headed ways. While scolding me, the emperor studied the young ladies in the painting carefully. This young lady in blue, not bad. She is the eldest daughter of the Qin household, 16 this year. The one beside the imperial consort Shou, that is the niece of the Shou Wang princess consort from her maternal family. The Yin family has fallen somewhat, so she grew up at Shou Wang's household. The one with slightly curly hair, the daughter of the Liu family of Hedong. Grandniece. What is wrong with that? The emperor then asked, this young lady in the silver-white dress, who is she? This one will not do, she is the daughter of the former admiral of Cheongzhou. Why not? I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the impulsive urge to shout at people. The former admiral of Cheongzhou had been impeached last year and was currently awaiting sentencing. At this moment, bringing his daughter into the palace, the intent was too obvious. If the other great families followed suit, it would likely damage the emperor's reputation. The emperor's expression shifted slightly. Perhaps he suddenly thought of how Xu Taining, Ning Sanyang, had entered the palace when old Master Ning was still a condemned official, and how today the Ning family's descendants had all returned to the 6 ministries. The Ning family had truly done well for itself. She was too daring. Was Ning Sanyang really attracted by his mediocre poetry to the point of voluntarily entering the palace as a concubine? How could he be more confident than even me? This consort acknowledges the error. The emperor continued to mean to reprimand me, but apparently could not find any reason to fault me. I had taken so much effort to organize a banquet to select beauties for him. The young ladies I did not consider beautiful or clever, I would not have chosen either. And yet he still had demands of me? Humph. The emperor flicked his sleeve in annoyance and left. I had the inner attendant store the painting and return to report to the Empress Dowager. The rear palace gained quite a few new young ladies. When they came to pay their respects to the Empress Dowager, even looking through them all at once was not sufficient. The Empress Dowager was full of hope looking at them. All of you must work hard to bear children to continue the imperial line for the emperor. Then she turned to encourage the older women. Xian Fei, you too must continue to work hard. Xu Fei and Xian Fei wore smiles that had been refined over years in the rear palace. Song Taining reported ill. Wei Zhao Yi fell silent and clutched her handkerchief tight. Song Taining, you have inherited the title of the palace's invisible woman after Rong Taining was exiled to the cold palace. This servant sees nothing. Yes, this consort will certainly do her best. The Empress Dowager continued, Zixing, this seat is always at ease with whatever you do. This group of young ladies, this seat entrusts them to you. You two listen carefully. Whoever holds the golden seal axe in this seat's place. Do not show disrespect. Yes. The voices of the new young ladies were gentle and melodious as the song of orioles. No one expected that on the very day the new arrivals entered the palace, the emperor would choose to visit me. When the emperor suddenly appeared at Shuyue residence, I had just returned from the Office of Imperial Household Affairs after handling business. I was still wearing my Chilean brocade and travel-ready shoes for walking about. Even my crown had been removed, my naturally curly hair was loose. I was lying on the divan, enjoying Fubao massaging my temples. Noticing the emperor, I hastily stood up. Why has the emperor come here? The moment I finished asking, I regretted it. In the middle of the night, the emperor running to a concubine's chambers. Could it be he was looking for me for a midnight snack? Fubao, will you not bring tea for the emperor? Fubao hurried off like a shot. The emperor came toward me, reached out and toyed with a lock of my fringe hair. Truly very curly, passed down from the ancestors. The emperor's hand moved from the fringe hair downward and held my shoulder, his eyes lit up bright as a beast in the wild that had finally spotted its prey. From the night visit until now, Shen has been enduring for a month. This consort has been enduring for a full year, you know. Did you not know? I calmly pulled the emperor's belt closer to me. Then endure no more. A year later, one day, noble consort Giyu going about her work. Shinji's 5th birthday had just passed, and I began searching all of Great Yen for a teacher for him. That's right, the emperor had 3 sons. The youngest, Shinji, was already 5 years old. Yet the emperor had still not opened the imperial study hall for the princes to read. Quite unbelievable. Of course there were some historical reasons. For example, the status of the eldest prince was rather sensitive. The second prince, Xinyang, spoiled by Xu Fei, had injured 3 reading companions, and Shinji was still too young and not yet suitable for formal study. But when all was said and done, there was only one true reason. The emperor simply did not care much about these 3 sons. One could not really blame him. The only 3 sons the emperor had were all of undistinguished birth. Now that there were so many beautiful young ladies in the rear palace, the emperor was likely always weary and lacking energy and therefore had even less time to think of this matter. Thus when I came to report on finding a teacher for the princes, he was extremely surprised. Is Shinji already of school age? The emperor said cheerfully, no need to rush. The spring hunt is about to begin. Zhen will take Yang and Ji Shi to the imperial estate to play for a few days. This matter, just leave it until after we return. Does the noble consort know how to ride a horse? I almost forgot about this. Shinji had long been looking forward to the spring hunt. Then let us wait until after the spring hunt to begin formal studies, but teachers for the princes must be selected from now on. The rear palace must not interfere in affairs of state. I respectfully request the emperor issue a decree to the Ministry of Rights. Very reasonable. It is still noble consort Gi who is thoughtful. The emperor looked at me as if to say, all right, I understand, you may step back. I moved forward to the reading desk, picked up the wolf-hair brush, and presented it. Today's business must not be put off to tomorrow. Please, Emperor, issue the decree now. At just this moment, the Empress Dowager stepped into the imperial study hall with a beaming face. The Emperor and Zixing are so affectionate. This seat has come at the wrong time. My hand trembled. I nearly dropped the brush. Humph, truly a demon who knows how to pick the perfect moment in the rear palace. Since I could not attend the spring hunt, I stayed behind to handle palace affairs, choose teachers and study companions for Shinji, and deal with the mountains of accumulated work. I truly could not leave the palace. You do not need to feel aggrieved. At the next spring hunt you will certainly have learned to ride. Then you can bring the 3rd prince along as well. Fubao brought warm goat's milk and babbled, this servant says nonsense. Nonsense, I am busy with palace affairs. Yes, 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 the mistress is absorbed in palace work. After drinking the goat's milk, someone from the Office of Imperial Household Affairs came to report that some rooms in the cold palace had been falling into disrepair for a long time and might collapse and injure palace servants. If they needed to be repaired, there was no knowing where the funds would come from. I had been in the palace for so long yet had never visited the cold palace, but this time I decided to take Fubao there to have a look. The concubines in favor had all gone on the spring hunt, bringing along their capable palace servants. The palace had suddenly grown much quieter. I disliked riding in palanquins and had walked there on foot. The cold palace steward, knowing I was coming, had come out to the very gate to welcome me. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a surge of cold air enveloping me. The women of the cold palace were lined up in rows, bowing their heads. Every one of them wore coarse cloth clothes, but I could see that though the fabric was poor, it was still warm enough. This steward seemed to be a person who understood things. The steward stepped forward to report to me how many criminal inmates were currently in the cold palace, how many servants, how many rooms, what was in the storeroom and how much it was worth, along with the specific condition and estimated cost of repair for the several long deteriorated spots. My eyes brightened, truly someone who knew how to do their job. Nyang Nyang praises me too much. Where did you work before? With this bearing, manner of speech, and face, you certainly cannot be an ordinary eunuch. This servant previously served at the Kunwa Hall. No wonder, the late Empress's eunuch. Likely implicated in the affair of the late Empress. Suddenly, from among the concubines exiled to the cold palace, a woman burst out. She was far thinner than the already undernourished people of the cold palace. Little more than a skeleton remained. What was more frightening was the large scar on her face that stretched from the center of her forehead to the corner of her mouth, nearly splitting her face in two. Vicious woman, I will not let you take everything from me, all of it is mine. But the woman had barely run a few steps before the guards of the cold palace blocked her way and sent her flying with a slap, knocking her unconscious on the ground. I had already guessed who she was. What surprised me was that she had not yet died. The chief eunuch quickly knelt to apologize. I waved my hand. If you could manage a madwoman, there would be no need for you to be here. You could go to the Imperial Medical Office to work. At the spot where the woman had fallen, another person had already used her foot to gently support the woman, not letting her faint on the cold ground. I recognized her immediately. Rong Taining, you had Wei Zhao Yi Miscari last year. Her face was clean, her hair neatly pinned. She looked even more spirited than when she had lived in luxury. Is it not the Rong household? Fubao hastily stepped forward to examine her. In reply to the mistress, it is Rong Taining. Rong Taining knelt and saluted me. Criminal subject Rong Taining pays respects to noble consort Gi Nyang Nyang. Are you living well in the cold palace? In reply to Nyang Nyang, criminal subject lives very well. I had not originally been a particularly kind-hearted person, but I still remembered that when I had just entered the palace and Shu Taining was being favored, when the entire rear palace looked down on me, only Rong Taining would still proactively chat with me each time we came to pay our respects to the Empress Dowager. The place where the Rong family was exiled to is a place called Shangxian. Though Shangxian is rife with pestilent air and insects, the fruits and grains there are very good. This palace has a maternal uncle there serving as the local garrison official. Last year when sending New Year gifts, this palace conveniently had someone pass on a message on your behalf. Contentment with one's lot is also a way of life. Rong Taining's eyes reddened. She wanted to kneel again. You need not thank me. What you had to suffer, you have already suffered. This palace will use funds from the private treasury to refurbish the cold palace. Live well, all of you. Yes. I brought Fu Bao and left. Before departing, I looked at the chief steward of the cold palace. Once the cold palace renovation is finished, come to Shuiyue residence to take up a post. The chief eunuch demurred. Nyang, this servant is an unlucky person. Might it not be appropriate? How unlucky can you be? As for being unlucky, looking at the people sitting here, none of you are any match for me. Shuiyue residence is on the east side of the central axis of the imperial city. The cold palace is to the north. On my way back, I was just in time for the Imperial Golden Guard at the center of the Imperial City to change their watch. Not wanting to take the old road, I chose to go around the west side before returning. But no matter how I dodged, I could not avoid it. When I neared the Yinglong Gate, I saw a gleam of golden armor. When did the Imperial Golden Guard start standing watch at the Yinglong Gate? Fu Bao shook her head. This servant does not know either. The Imperial Golden Guard were the Emperor's personal guards. This time only a very small detachment had been left behind to guard the center of the Imperial City. They should not have come here. The cold palace was also part of the rear palace. Men from outside should not enter. The Imperial Golden Guard had also noticed my ceremonial escort. Several third-rank guards hastily knelt in salute. Near the Yinglong Gate, a man in armor wearing a python-embroidered belt, only the commander of the Imperial Golden Guard could wear this, walked leading a child in his direction. Fu Bao took a sharp breath. Young miss, the little fool is so frightened she's dreaming of turning 18. The man was tall and imposing, his armor making him appear even more powerfully built. At his side hung a black long sword. His left arm was clamped around a little boy dressed as a eunuch. Beneath his deep-set eyes, beyond the ordinary, were thoughts I could not fathom. He came closer and closer, close enough that I could almost smell the sandalwood fragrance on him. He bared his teeth in a grin, revealing gleaming white teeth, like a wolf that was both foolish and fierce. Fu Bao hastily retreated backward, pulling the palace servants back several yards, leaving just me and him standing face to face. Many years without meeting, Nyang. Promoted and advancing, this subject almost did not recognize you. I hope Nyang will forgive the offense. Shenduo, speak properly. Shenduo looked straight at me, lifting his chin in an extremely aggravating manner. He was so tall that when talking with others like this, everyone had to look up at him. Forgive me, this subject does not know how to speak properly. If you do not know how to speak, then go somewhere cool and stay there. This place of Nyang's is very cool. You try speaking to me like that again, just you wait. I was so furious I wanted to roll up my sleeves and have a fistfight. The small child who had been constantly clamped under Shenduo's arms suddenly spoke. Let me down first, can you? This was Shenduo releasing the child. Only now could I see the child's features clearly. He looked fairly handsome, but his chin had a light stubble, clearly not a eunuch. This is the eldest prince. The eldest prince. I said, Shenduo, you have grabbed the wrong person. Shenduo crossed his arms and said calmly, Nyang, if you do not believe it, you may send a palace servant to identify him. He dared to say this. The child must certainly be eldest Prince Xinyuan. Xinyuan, why have you come to the Yinglong Gate with the eldest prince? Shenduo replied, this subject also wants to ask Nyang Nyang why she came to the Yinglong Gate. This morning I saw Nyang Nyang's ceremonial escort pass through the central palace heading this way, and was just thinking that since the watch had not yet changed, perhaps I might meet Nyang Nyang. Nyang Nyang, could it be you are avoiding this subject? I have not. I was not, do not talk nonsense. Fu Bao, from behind, gave a gentle cough reminding me the eldest prince was still there. Sure enough, with Shenduo's entirely uninhibited manner, even if Xinyuan were a bit slow, he understood what was happening. I smiled and looked toward Xinyuan. Eldest prince, why did you come here? Xinyuan stammered, a walk. A walk that brought the Imperial Golden Guard out? Xinyuan looked at me, then looked at Shenduo. You all let me go, I saw nothing. Nothing at all. Not a bad idea. Rather than letting you go, this palace will just directly kill you for the sake of convenience. Xinyuan recoiled in fright. You want the Commander Shen to take you to see the Emperor? Or will this palace escort you back to the rear palace? Xinyuan quickly said, I do not want to go on the spring hunt. Then follow this palace. Shenduo suddenly spoke up, I already said Nyang Nyang could take him. What are noble consort Gi Nyang Nyang's ears for? What Shenduo wants me to do has never been up to you to agree to. What if I insist on stopping this? If you can stop it, then stop it. So much nonsense. Stop acting like a woman. I heard him give a faint laugh. You Zixing, you have not changed one bit. I was too lazy to pay him any attention and walked away quickly. Xinyuan lived alone in a place called the Huguang Shaochu, the lake-like bamboo pavilion, behind the Kunhua Hall. The name sounded elegant. In reality it had been converted from an old stage, not only remote but cold in winter and scorching in summer, with mosquitoes humming all around. Currently at his side were only one wet nurse and one inner attendant. As a prince, compared with Shenyang and Shenji, it was truly worlds apart. Noble consort Gi Nyang, will the emperor know of today's events? He will. Xinyuan bowed his head. Can you conceal this from the emperor? Useless, you are a prince. I cannot conceal it. Xinyuan, wearing inner attendant's clothes, stood before the dilapidated Huguang Shaochu. The surrounding ground was covered in the musty smell of green moss long uncleaned. Inside, an old, hunched wet nurse poked her head out to look at him. The scene was truly wretched enough to be laughable, and yet Xinyuan had already lived here for more than 3 years. From the time the late empress had passed, he had lived like this. You had better think carefully about how to apologize to the emperor when he returns to the palace. A prince who runs away from the palace on his own, that is truly a laughingstock. This matter is not easy to resolve. I did not want to become too entangled with Xinyuan. But Xinyuan called me back. Nyang Nyang, am I very ridiculous? Just now I truly had intentions of using my connection with the Shin commander to threaten and force you to take me out of the palace. Fu Bao saw I was about to respond and urgently and quietly shook her head. But I still answered him, your idea is actually quite feasible, but with your current capabilities, you cannot do it. Xinyuan had thought I would mock him, but I did not. His face, with its 5 parts of resemblance to the emperor, showed a flash of surprise. At that moment I suddenly saw from him the shadow of Shinji grown up. The greatest mistake you made is not that you wanted to escape, but that you recklessly acted when you yourself lacked the ability. This is not knowing clearly that it cannot be done yet doing it anyway, this is merely avoidance. Shin Yuan, you are the eldest imperial prince. That identity alone is sufficient to turn the tide. Read more books, observe more people. The road in the palace is still long, you have not yet walked to its end. Shin Yuan looked at me as if looking at a monster. That slightly pale and wan face suddenly flushed with a surge of blood color. This palace has just come from the cold palace. I see your mother there. She is still alive. The blood color in Shin Yuan's eyes surged up into a storm. Mother is still alive? Are you well? Have you said anything? She is very weak, more haggard than you, much more so. If I were you, even for her sake I would not yield so easily. That was the end of today's quota of kindness. I did not intend to continue giving Shin Yuan encouragement and warmth. Fu Bao, back to the palace. Yes, Nyang Nyang. Shin Yuan did not ask further, only prostrated himself flat on the ground, pressing his forehead to the earth with a low, dull thud. The teachers selected for the princes were ultimately three renowned scholars of the day, the director of the Hanlin Academy, Shining, father of Shinduo and the former commander of the Imperial Golden Guard, and the minister of the Ministry of Rights, Li Shushu, who had been my father's classmate at the Imperial Academy, quick and capable. No wonder he had risen so fast. The three men chosen, even examining them by lamplight, I could find not a single flaw. I mixed a family letter in with the official memorials and had it quickly dispatched to the imperial estate. Fu Bao went to the Office of Imperial Household Affairs to check account books. Another palace maid served tea to me in the study. Outside the study there was a commotion. Who was talking? In reply to Nyang Nyang, it is the eldest prince making a fuss, wanting to see you. I set down my teacup and looked at that palace maid for a few breaths. She was terrified and knelt. Nyang Nyang, forgive this servant knows the error. No, you do not know the error. You do not even understand why this palace is angry. The palace maid buried her head down and dared not answer. She had barely knelt when all the sounds of Shuyue residence vanished. Inside and out, everyone went utterly silent. Even heavy breathing was not dared. These moments when Fu Bao was present were always better, with her shielding in front. The others were not as afraid of me. Tell this palace who is outside the door. It is the eldest prince. They also know that is the eldest prince, that he is of imperial blood, that this is a person who wants to see this palace. This palace wanting to see him or not wanting to see him is another matter, but who gave any of you the gall to obstruct a prince and hide it from a noble consort? Has living in the palace so comfortably made you all forget even the basic rules? This servant knows the error, Nyang Nyang. You yourself go and beg the eldest prince's pardon. When he forgives you, then you may return to your duties. Yes. Not long after, Shin Yuan entered. This time he had changed into a white moonbeam-colored ordinary robe with patterns, the style fashionable a few years ago. Surely it had been made when the late empress was still alive. Shin Yuan decisively knelt before me. This son has heard Nyang Nyang is seeking a teacher for the princes. This son is bold enough to beg Nyang Nyang to permit this son to enter the imperial study hall for his enlightenment. On what grounds? This son alone, having nothing on his side, naturally there is nothing that could move Nyang. If Nyang does not agree, this son will go to beg Xian Fei. Nyang will beg the emperor, going through each person one by one. This son only asks not to be left with a guilty conscience. All right then, go beg. Shen Yuan said nothing more, kowtowed, and rose to leave. Why not go beg the Empress Dowager? She is the one who loves her grandchildren most. Shen Yuan gave a slight shudder. If there was anyone in this rear palace who could be called Shen Yuan's enemy, it was only the Empress Dowager, the one who had imprisoned his birth mother in the cold palace. The death of the late empress was in truth unrelated to his mother. It was only that the imperial family wished to appease the fury of the late empress's natal family. The emperor had been deeply averse to Shen Yuan also because Shen Yuan had once shown disrespect toward the Empress Dowager. Shen Yuan, you are unlike Shen Yang and Shen Ji. Your cards are all played out. If you do not swap to a new hand, you will never be able to place your bets at the table again. This son will not forget the kindness of Nyang. The emperor finally led his great party back to the palace. It was obvious he had gone hunting, yet the person who returned was white and plump. I stood at the palace gate to welcome him. Shen Duo stood outside the palace gate with the guards, watching from afar. When he saw the emperor, he gave me a mocking look. Truly made me recall those years when Shening threw him off to the northern D without allowing him to return to the capital. Xu Fei led the two princesses and Shen Yang. The Empress Dowager led Shen Ji. The emperor personally led Xu Taining's third princess. The sight of this made those concubines standing behind green with envy. I had not yet saluted the emperor when I suddenly saw someone burst out from inside the palace gate in moonbeam white clothing, Shen Yuan. The young concubines who did not know his identity showed expressions of terror. Xu Fei and Xian Fei, who did recognize him, could not suppress the fright on their faces. But Shen Yuan seemed to feel none of the hostile intent. He respectfully saluted the emperor and the Empress Dowager. His etiquette had been taught by the late empress, flawless. Shen Yang curled his lip and pointed at him, talking to Xu Fei in an extremely disrespectful gesture, but Shen Yuan kept smiling. Smiling when paying his respects. Smiling when apologizing. Smiling when asking the emperor and the Empress Dowager whether the spring hunt had been enjoyable. If viewed by outsiders, they would certainly think this was a warm and harmonious family. The emperor's expression was not good. The last time he and Shen Yuan had spoken, they had said things a father and son should not say to each other. Disobedient and unfilial, truly the son takes after the vile mother. That's right, the emperor had also said the same things as the Empress Dowager. Who could have expected that a 6-year-old Shen Yuan would have such a temper? But at this moment, Shen Yuan was calmly respectful, looking at the emperor with a gentle expression and warmly inquiring after the Empress Dowager. What a well-behaved and considerate child. The Empress Dowager's glance swept across Shen Yuan and paused on me. I smiled at her. Finally the Empress Dowager helped Shen Yuan up. It is good to know your mistakes. From now on, study with your younger brothers. You are the eldest brother, no more misbehaving. Thank you, Imperial Grandmother. Thank you, Father Emperor. I sat there bored, picking at my fingernails. Truly a scene of imperial family warmth and harmony. Shen Ji had just returned from the palace and shut himself in his small bedroom and refused to come out, not allowing anyone else in either. Granny Rong came to find me, this time going out. The prince had great fun, even when the second prince teased him, he did not get angry at all. Coming back like this, Nyang Nyang, go take a look. Forget it, let him make a fuss. He thinks he's 3 years old. I had just reported on the imperial study hall to the emperor, and then gone to pay my respects to the Empress Dowager. She was in a troubled mood because of today's events and gave me a few words of reprimand. At this moment one could say my body and mind were both exhausted. And yet by dinner time Shinji still refused to come out for the meal. After supper I reviewed account books with the steward of the Office of Imperial Household Affairs. After bathing and changing clothes, I came to stand before Shinji's door. Shinji, open the door. The door of the room immediately swung open. Shinji had been crying, his eyes were red and swollen. You waited for me all day and I only just came. Shinji said this while rubbing his runny nose, quite a mess to look at. I pulled my skirt and sat down on the doorstep, patting the spot beside me. This palace has only a moment of time for you. Come here and talk. Shinji obediently sat down beside me. Fubao and Granny Rong consciously left the lanterns behind and led the palace servants to draw back some distance. Shinji leaned against me, his head resting against my legs, secretly wiping his runny nose on my skirt. I know why you are angry. Because I helped Shin Yuan, and are afraid. Am I bad? Because you want Shin Yuan to also become your son, don't you? Shinji's aggrieved little voice rang out. I am not as smart as eldest imperial brother, not as tall as him. Have you grown to dislike me? Next time I will not go out to play on my own, I will follow you. Do not abandon me. I laughed, Shinji made me laugh. Shinji, I know that helping Shin Yuan would make many people angry with me. But I still did it. Not because he is so wonderful, and not to gain any benefit from him. So then why? Because that day when he looked at me, I discovered that you and he share many similarities. And I suddenly realized, you are brothers. Shinji raised his head to look at me, completely puzzled. In his bright eyes was a great puzzlement. Do you know how miraculous a thing blood relations are? My father died early. When I was brought to the capital to face relatives who were almost strangers, yet when my great-uncle smiled at me, I was no longer afraid. Father liked to brew tea from snowmelt. Great-uncle had to have braised pork at every meal. But the two of them had so many similarities, seeing great-uncle was like father had never left. Shinji said, but I and Shin Yuan, and also Shin Yang, we are not born of the same mother. If Yuzidu and the others dared say this to me, I would use a rod to beat them. Shinji reluctantly smiled. But imperial family brothers are ultimately different from brothers in other families. Shinji, what do imperial princes seek? Is it only the throne of emperor? Shinji was startled. He had not expected me to say it so bluntly. His expression shifted. The world is vast and the great Yen dynasty is small. And this imperial palace is even smaller. From the emperor and the empress dowager within the imperial palace down to you and me, all of us are as tiny as stars in the night sky. Only able to see what is directly before one's eyes, naturally one can only compete for brightness with other stars. But look at that vast and boundless sky, then you will know how small you are. To change heaven and earth is no different from an ant moving a tree. First know that you are small, then develop the ambitions to shine together with the sun and moon. I who do not illuminate the world leave it in darkness. I patted his shoulder. Shinji, do you know how much I envy you? What you were born with is something I perhaps could strive a lifetime and never achieve. What you possess so easily, I must endure mockery and curses that ordinary people could not bear. One slight misstep and countless people will want to rush in and drink my blood and eat my flesh. And yet I am not afraid, not because I am the daughter of Chongwen Gong, or because my great-uncle commands a great army, or because I am a noble consort in the rear palace raising a prince. I am not afraid. I want to keep moving forward, simply because I want to see what the scenery looks like ahead. Rear palace, so what? Emperor, so what? All of Great Yen, so what? I honestly do not take it to heart. My father said before his death, absolutely never yield. You too must absolutely never yield. You would shout at those soldiers cowering and wanting to flee, what are you running for? Die face up to the sky. If you do not die, you will live 10,000 years. Shinji, now this seat asks you, what are you afraid of? What are you trying to avoid? Is it Shin Yuan who frightened you? Or is it your own true, base desires you do not dare face? Shinji was speechless, his lips slightly parted, but in his eyes a light began to flicker. Go on, accompany Shin Yuan. Study hard, read more books. Meet more people. Only then will you know how to live in a way that does not waste this life. Shinji suddenly threw himself onto me, burying his head in my lap. Thank you, Nyang Nyang. The Empress Dowager personally chose a study companion for Shinji, the 8th-generation lineal heir of the Jiangnan Han family. I was deeply suspicious that the Empress Dowager's maternal family had once sold pork, and had not spared gifts to the Han family. Otherwise, why would the Han family willingly give away their 8th-generation single heir? That concept alone, 8th-generation single heir, if the slightest mishap occurred, one could say the family line would be extinguished. And this Han Ran boy, sickly and frail from birth, just walking quickly or breathing too hard could make him faint. What did the Empress Dowager want? Wanting him small, wanting him frail. The first time Shinji went out of the palace gates to welcome his new study companion, even I did not dare follow. I was afraid I would curse him to death. And yet the Empress Dowager went about bragging to me, only this seat could find such a wonderful companion for Ji Shi. At the time Shinji still did not know how frail his future companion was. Never mind teaming up to bully others or getting into fights, just carrying his own box of books was enough to grind his shoulder raw. And so Shinji ended up helping his reading companion carry the book box. For this reason, most of the time I was very much in doubt as to which one was actually the study companion of which. As for Shin Yang, because from an early age he had a track record of injuring reading companions, no family dared risk their son's life by sending him to study alongside this prince. Left with no other option, Xu Fei had to find a nephew from her own mother's family to send for her son to bully. I privately thought, can you do that? And so Yu Zirwei, plump and white-cheeked, hugging snacks, came to the imperial study hall and became Shin Yang's reading companion. The first day Shinji went to study, because a mistake had occurred at the construction office, I had rushed off to deal with it and had Granny Rong escort him. I had fully expected that when he returned he would be resentful toward me, but this little one instead wore an expression of great suffering. He would not eat his meal, he just buried himself in reading books. What was wrong? Shinji shook his head and sighed deeply. Tell me. Shinji slammed his book bag to the ground. They are not human. Not human. The people he meant must have been referring to the chubby little brother with a supernatural memory. Yuzirwei, the prodigy, Han ran, sickly and frail, yet whenever he opened his mouth it was a torrent of eloquence. Along with the initial appearance of Shin Yuan, handsome as a youth, with beautiful calligraphy. Shinji continued his complaints. Why give birth to Ji Shi when you were already going to give birth to Ran? Why give birth to Ji Shi when you were already going to give birth to Zirwei? Why give birth to Ji Shi when you were also going to give birth to Yuan? Why don't you all just agree not to give birth anymore? Shinji looked at my belly with a hint of expectation and said, giving birth to a dumb child would not be so bad. Fubao had just come in with warm goat's milk. Come and look at Fubao auntie, she is not smart either. Fubao nyang nyang, this servant heard that. Do not interrupt. Though Fubao is not so clever, which person in the Office of Imperial Household Affairs who is clever does not fear her? Who dares not listen to her? Fubao stuck up her round chubby face proudly. Shinji calmly analyzed, that is called borrowing the fox's prestige from the tiger. Shinji then looked at me, mother is so smart, you certainly have never been second in class, have you? I truly have never been second. I was not worthy of second place. In truth, one cannot judge heroes by their learning. Shinji nodded, I understand then. You are also like me, you both sat at the back of the class. What kind of school is this anyway? For the physical and mental health of Shinji. I especially organized a small gathering, inviting the boys from the Imperial Study Hall over. A crowd of small lads who had just gotten out of school came trooping in, all wearing identical short dark blue-green cloaks embroidered with immortal cranes, made to order from the Shanggong Bureau, carrying small book bags. The reading companions of Shinyang and Shinji each carried 2 bags, piling into Shuiwei residence. Shin Yuan, as the eldest brother, led his younger brothers in greeting me. I carefully observed this group, truly a bunch of students of varying heights and sizes, packed together. They sat down at the table, and Shin Yuan was the first to pick up chopsticks, only then did the others begin eating. Even the troublemaker Shin Yang was unusually quiet and well-behaved. Hearing Shinji's account of the past few days, Shin Yang had been properly disciplined. The story was this: early on in class, he had boldly fallen asleep. The teacher was furious and punished him with strikes to the palm. Unexpectedly, Shin Yang had another student take the beating for him while he himself sat comfortably nearby eating cold watermelon fanned by a palace maid. Who would have thought that within fewer than 2 days, that reading companion had turned on the nephew of Xu Fei? Quite strange. The story was this: after Xu Fei was favored by the emperor, her younger brother had abandoned his first wife and married a beauty as a concubine. The first wife's son, named Zhang Chongsheng, had to return to live with his maternal grandmother. Later his mother died of illness, and his stepmother seized all his mother's property, so the boy had to beg for his living. And indeed, Jiang Chongsheng had cut off his hair and lain flat on the ground, begging his way through life. The nephew of Xu Fei reduced to begging, what an embarrassment. The common people of the capital had treated this as a laughingstock and gossiped about it for a long time. Not until last year had Xu Fei learned of it and hurriedly sent her younger brother to find the child. Fortunately the boy was found, otherwise Jiang Chongsheng might have become the leader of a beggar gang. I heard he had been quite successful at begging, having fought through several brawls, all the beggars in the Jiangping Phoenix district had come under his sway. One who could carve out a position among beggars, how could he be bullied by Shenyang? So afterward, every time Shenyang made a mistake causing Jiang Changxing to be punished, if Jiang Changxing received 2 strikes, Shenyang would get 4. If Jiang Changxing was punished to copy 1 page, Shenyang would copy an entire volume. He even got blocked from going to the bathroom by Jiang Changxing. If Shenyang refused to finish copying, and ran off to complain to Xu Fei, Jiang Changxing would simply kneel before Shenyang and say, "Today I knelt, tomorrow you must kneel twice as long." Shenyang completely broke down. Bullies fear those with nothing to lose. There was no way he could beat Jiang Changxing. From then on, Shenyang no longer dared to misbehave in the imperial study hall. Sharing a similar fate of difficult destiny with Shenyang was also Shenji. Shenji's situation was even worse than Shenyang's. If he made a mistake, Han Ran would have to take the beating. But how could Han Ran take a beating? Han Ran was so fragile that even a strong gust of wind could knock him over. So Shenji and Shenyang suddenly developed a sense of mutual sympathy. This meal proceeded in a rather strange atmosphere. Yu Zirwei was the most food-loving person there. The moment he sat down he had been reaching for food non-stop. Shen Yuan noticed the dish of braised pork was a bit far from him and considerately picked some for him. Shenji saw this and secretly thought, "This is something I should learn. I must win over my more studious classmates. Only then in the future will I have someone to do homework for me." With that thought he quickly picked a stalk of vegetables for Han Ran. Shenyang, seeing his elder brothers both showing such respect for talented people, could not suppress the spirit of competition, and ladled a bowl of soup for Jiang Changxing. Fu Bao came in to serve and saw this scene, so astonished her mouth fell open and would not close again. After withdrawing, she secretly said to me, "Truly worthy of being princes." After eating I brought out the Weiqi board and the 9-link puzzle for the children to play. Yu Zirwei kept beating Shen Yuan. Han Ran kept beating Shenji. Shenji then had Yu Zirwei and Han Ran play against each other. The result was that both little ones played themselves into an inescapable stalemate with no winner. Shenyang grew bored and demanded to play the arrow-throwing game. Shenji surely thought he was very good at this, so he invited everyone to play together. The result, all 3 of the Shen imperial brothers missed every single throw. "You all know, I come from a family that talks," said Yu Zirwei. "You all know," coughed Han Ran, "I was sick at home with nothing to play, cough cough." "You all know," said Jiang Changxing, "I used to take charge of the arrow-throwing game at a gambling house to earn money." From the very first day of school, the 3 Shen brothers had experienced the feeling of mountains beyond mountains. I had long since not seen Xu Taining. After the younger and prettier concubines entered the palace, the emperor's favor toward her had somewhat reduced. But thanks to her adorable 3rd princess, she had maintained her position in the rear palace. I had once said Ning Sanyang was truly an interesting person. Interesting in that both of us understood clearly she had never actually valued the emperor, never competed for favor, never cared about jewels or silk or jewelry, and yet she could transform herself into a perfect concubine who was excellent at winning the emperor's heart. She walked over slowly, her manner leisured, that distant, proud air she found hard to conceal. "I came only to tell you one thing. The emperor wants to establish an empress." "Oh, how strange." I had always thought that after the late empress passed away, the emperor would never want to establish another one. "Not you, not me, but Jin Zhaoyuan." I fell silent, waiting for her to continue. I always wanted to see just how long you could stay arrogant. Who would have thought that even at this point you could still remain this calm? I smiled, deliberately not using her palace title but calling her Ning Sanyang. At 13, when I first heard of your fame and read through the poems you composed, I thought, if I ever had the chance to meet this young lady, I would certainly address her with the informal Sanyang. Ning Sanyang, why don't we make a bet? If the emperor wants to establish an empress, that person will certainly be me. Ning Sanyang stood stunned, her bright, passionate eyes briefly showed a glimmer of tears. She smiled bitterly, no need to bet, I have already lost. I admire you greatly. You do not live only for your family and clan. Be careful of the women in this rear palace. They have hidden too long already. My thanks. Before leaving she said to me, her courtesy name was Ding Tong. Wait until you become empress, then address me by my courtesy name. In the 10th year of the Tianshu era, in the 10th month, the early snow of the capital arrived earlier than usual. Jin Zhaoyuan Jiubaoyi, former Shui Sima Marin were successively diagnosed as pregnant. The emperor and the empress dowager were overjoyed, bestowing generous rewards upon the entire rear palace. Jiubaoyi was elevated to Jiutaining, former Shui was elevated to Qianzhao-yi, Sima Marin was elevated to Sima Jieyu. And both I and Jin Zhaoyuan were at the same time elevated to the rank of consort. By this point the palace had the full complement of 4 consorts, Xian Fei, Xu Fei, noble consort Giyu, and Jin Fei. For Jin Zhaoyuan to leap from Zhaoyuan all the way up to consort, those with sharp eyes could all see the emperor was step by step elevating Jin Zhaoyuan to the position of empress. The empress dowager suddenly decided to go to the western mountains to worship Buddha for half a year. She even brought Granny Rong along. In the eyes of everyone in the rear palace, the empress dowager leaving the palace was no different from the emperor deciding to give up on me. I had been in the palace for quite a long time yet had only been visited twice, and yet I had been elevated to the 4th consort rank. Many in the palace believed this was because I had been loved and protected by the empress dowager. The emperor slept at Jin Fei's place every single night, even when she was pregnant he made no exception. It seemed the emperor truly loved Jin Fei. 3,000 beauties in the rear palace, and from now on he would choose only one. Was that truly so? I sipped hot goat's milk while looking out the window at the snow falling white over the entire sky. I did not know where Shining had learned these rules, but he had the students doing military training in the courtyard in the bitterly cold winter weather. A group of children were shivering in thin martial arts uniforms. Han Ran sat beside Shining to keep warm, but his expression was even paler than the children training outside. Han Ran relied on the advantage of his frail health to dodge all military training sessions, and had furthermore become close friends across the generations with Shining. In those years when Shining had rescued the late emperor he had been dragged across several miles of frozen lake, and when he was finally saved, both his legs had been crippled. From the time I could remember, Shining had always sat in a wheelchair. Han Ran stood upright. Shining sat in his wheelchair. 2 people at the same height. I could not help but think, in his youth, Shining had surely been like Shinduo, an exceptionally tall and handsome young man. I brought hot soup for the children to drink after their training to warm their bodies. Han Ran brought me a small chair. I took from the heating stove on Shinying's lap a few baked sweet potatoes. The 3 of us sat huddled together in the falling snow, eating baked sweet potatoes while watching the children train, truly delightful. Shen Yuan and Yu Zirwei were sparring with each other, one thrusting forward, the other retreating, snowflakes flying in all directions. Shen Yang was pinned face first in the snow by Jiang Chongqing, unable to budge, like a foolish little fawn that had head-butted straight into a snowdrift. Shen Ji saw us eating baked sweet potatoes and felt unhappy. He was about to run over to beg some when Shening suddenly reached out and scooped up a handful of snow and threw it. Shen Ji agilely dodged, but Shen Yang, who had just escaped from Jiang Chongqing, was hit squarely. Shen Yang stood dazed, not understanding why the world had suddenly grown so cold. Clearly before going to school Shen Yang had still been a child pampered and spoiled by everyone. "I will fight to the death with all of you." And so a snowball fight broke out. Shen Yang charged forward in front, Shen Yuan ambushed from behind. Jiang Chongqing was about to seize this opportunity to grab Shen Yang, but was beaten to tatters by the combined efforts of Shen Ji and Shen Yuan. Han Ran sat to one side eating baked sweet potatoes and watching the battle. Suddenly he lamented, "If there were one more beautiful young lady, life would be perfect." I privately thought, am I not a beautiful young lady? I secretly grabbed a handful of snow and aimed it at Han Ran, but the unfilial wretch Shen Ji called out, "Mother is sneaking an attack over there." Brothers attack. Even foolish Shen Yang joined in the chorus. Han Ran was frail and easily toppled with one push. "Quickly protect Han Ran." Jiang Chongqing, if you dare lay a hand on noble consort Gi Nyang, I will not forgive you. Shen Yuan continued to ambush Shen Ji. Yu Zirwei shouted, "Who dares touch Biaoyi, whether they flee to the ends of the earth, I will track them down and take my revenge." Han Ran trembled as he looked at this chaotic scene, and timidly offered me a freshly peeled baked sweet potato. "Please have some, Nyang Nyang." Shening glared at me, as though blaming me for frightening children. I happily lobbed a snowball at the foolish son charging at the front. When these children had been rampaging in snowball battles, they had not yet been born. On the way back to the palace I ran into the procession of Hong Kong County Princess. The children had not yet finished school. I told them when class ended to come to Shuyue residence for grilled meat before returning to their palaces. I had originally liked to walk around the palace. When I met Hong Kong County Princess, she was sitting inside her palanquin with a languid air, leaning against the side. Though nearly 50 years old, she was still a very beautiful woman. She glanced at me and gave a slight smile. "Noble consort Gi Nyang, truly what an elegant mood, going for a stroll in the snow at leisure." If I were a bit younger, perhaps I would have the same mood. I ignored her and kept walking. Hong Kong County Princess said coldly, "Noble consort Gi Nyang, is she pretending not to recognize this seat, or does she think the Yuang household has no one of consequence?" The eldest daughter of Yu Wang, when just 1 year old, she was already conferred the title of County Princess. Her looks were breathtakingly beautiful, to the point that the late emperor once sighed that it was a pity she was a girl in the Shen family. Later she married Jin Jun of the Jingyang Marquis household. In a dream she saw petals raining down into her lap, and gave birth to a daughter. That daughter is the Jin Fei in our palace. Seeing this, the county princess has not merely recognized me but also knows my family background clearly. The county princess gave me a meaningful look, understanding that I had fully grasped the situation, then pretended not to see me. The county princess married down in rank. The Jingyang Marquis is a Zheng second-rank public marquis. And so Hong Kong County Princess is only a Weiming second-rank wife. Though she holds the title of county princess, she is only an outsider of third rank at most. While I am one of the 4 consorts with a personal title, naming first rank Xingpin. Whether by rank or by noble title, you are only a county princess of third rank, while I am one of the 4 consorts. When you meet me, not only did you not dismount from the palanquin to salute me, you also spoke ambiguously to me. I was giving face to you Wang and pretending not to notice. Who would have expected you to insist on pressing me? I want to ask, how did the Yuang household teach its daughter? And how did the Jingyang Marquis teach his wife? Hong Kong County Princess shook with fury and could not utter a word. From childhood to now, she had perhaps never suffered such humiliation. What made her even angrier was that the palanquin-bearing eunuchs, seeing my fury, prostrated themselves in terror and set the palanquin down on the ground. She was still seated in the palanquin, but now could only lift her head to look up at me. I issued a decree. Hong Kong County Princess was disrespectful to an inner palace wife, the crime of arrogance, 3 months forbidden from entering the palace. If she offends again, invite the Jingyang Marquis to come and receive her at the office for a reprimand. Your nerve, being insolent to a 4th consort, the crime is 1 degree more serious, penalized half a year's salary. I did not entangle further with Hong Kong County Princess. After giving these instructions I departed. But 3 days after Hong Kong was expelled from the palace, Jean Fei, using the pretense of poor health and missing her father, summoned Hong Kong County Princess back into the palace. Jean Fei opened a banquet in her own palace, inviting all the pregnant concubines and those most favored, extremely lively. I was rushing to the imperial study hall to discuss with the prince's teachers about the content of the monthly examination. Unexpectedly, an incident occurred at the banquet. Sima Jiayu, the youngest of them all, had food mixed with safflower and unfortunately suffered a miscarriage. This is the rear palace you manage for Zhen? A cup of tea shattered at my feet, the splashing water stained the snow-white cloak with spreading brown marks. Sima Jiayu wept piteously, her mournful cries echoed through the great hall. Hong Kong County Princess offered hypocritical consolation, urging her to take care of herself. Before the emperor had even fully investigated the matter, he had already placed all the blame on me, believing I was the one who had mixed safflower into the food. Jean Fei, who was pregnant, stood beside the emperor with a worried expression, looking at me, playing the role of devoted sisters. Your Majesty, please do not blame elder sister. I hear that recently elder sister often goes to the imperial study hall. Perhaps because she is too concerned about the prince's studies, she has been negligent in managing the rear palace. She is a concubine, not a prince's wet nurse. Why would the reading of books need her to manage? As the consort she is not even a nursemaid. Why would she need to manage the prince's studying? She cannot even properly oversee a small banquet, and has harmed Zhen's son. What exactly is she plotting? Does she truly think that just because she has one prince, she can look down on anyone in this rear palace? Xu Fei stood by and coldly watched. Wei Zhaoyi was unexpectedly silent. And those beautiful new concubines were all rolling up their sleeves, all looking at me, waiting for me to react so they could all pile on and drown me. I suddenly burst out laughing. You want to pin a crime on someone, why does there need to be a reason? You dare laugh? Zhen says you are possessed by demons. An imperial decree came down. Noble consort Gui's management of the rear palace was poor. As punishment, her right to manage the rear palace was stripped, she was confined to Shuiwei residence and was not permitted to leave without an imperial decree. Xu Fei looked at me with an expression of satisfaction, of revenge finally achieved. But upon closer inspection, even in her eyes there was a trace of worry. Today the emperor could punish me without even asking for the reason. Tomorrow it could be their turn. After seeing clearly this cruel truth, that looks fade quickly and sentiment fades with it, who could truly be happy? I made no argument. Gracefully handed over the golden seal, and alone returned to Shuiwei residence. Barely through the door I saw Shen Yuan leading his younger brothers and classmates waiting outside. Shen Ji ran up and grabbed my hand. Mother, Changxing secretly brought half a wild deer into the palace. Let us roast meat and eat it. Yu Zirwei offered me a small cake. Biaoyi, are you hungry? Eat this bean cake. I said, I'm sorry. Today all of you cannot eat dinner at Shuiwei residence anymore. I have been confined and cannot receive outside visitors. Looking at Shenji, the child here, I am temporarily entrusting your care to Shen Yuan. Then at Shenduo, also, tell Zirwei to eat a little less. Then, and you, Changsheng, Shenyang is already afraid of you. There is no need to keep deliberately provoking him. If you treat him as a cousin brother, stop looking at him that way. And you, Changsheng, both Shenyang and Shen Yuan are afraid of you. You like people, it cannot be like that. I like him, then show it and let it go. All right, hurry back before the palace gates close. Before the gates closed I saw Yu Zirwei crying. And would not stop. I was afraid her eyes would swell up by morning and hurriedly intervened. Fu Bao, silly girl. This seat knows what this seat is doing. Fu Bao wept until her nose dripped, her voice choked. This servant is simply angry. Boo-hoo-hoo, mistress. Boo-hoo. When has anything ever been able to be settled by a muddle-headed emperor? Boo-hoo, and he's so good at it too. Boo-hoo-hoo. He is emperor and can do it all his life. I hastily covered Fu Bao's mouth. This girl managing the office of imperial household affairs all this time, she had truly grown up. Before, she had trembled with fear at the mere sight of the emperor. Now she had the spirit to rise up in opposition. Fu Bao, whom I had bought by the roadside for 3 coins of silver all those years ago, had changed to the point where I felt slightly unfamiliar, yet I really wanted to kiss her. In the spring of the Tianshu era something year, Jean Fei gave birth to a prince. She was elevated to Jean noble consort. The emperor adored this 4th prince without measure, specially conferring the title of Rong Qin Wang and naming him Shensu, from the name to the title, all completely different from the treatment given to his 3 elder brothers. It was as if these were the emperor's true children while the other 3 had been picked up off the street. I was in Shuiwei residence, spending the new year after Jiyuan in my isolation. News from outside gradually diminished. I only heard that Han Ran, Changsheng, and even Zirwei had all stayed in the palace with Shen Yuan for the new year without going home. Zirwei had always been very clingy with his Din Yang and needed to be coaxed to sleep by her, yet this year he did not go home either. I understood they were all swallowing a belly full of anger. I had spent nearly half a year planning everything, and then an utterly random event happened. On the 7th day of the 4th month, someone set fire to my Shuiwei residence. The arsonist was actually not someone working for Jean noble consort, nor any enemy of mine. It was a small palace maid who, unable to bear the hunger, had found a secluded spot to roast a sweet potato. After I took charge of managing the rear palace, I had cut expenditures dramatically. Both the court and the rear palace praised this endlessly. Jean Noble Consort, unwilling to be outdone after taking over management, cut even more severely, but Jean Noble Consort only wanted others to suffer while she herself did not. Her own palace chambers were as lavish and wasteful as the emperor's sleeping palace. The emperor spent every night sharing her bed and rarely went to any other concubine's place. These things, whether the emperor was completely unaware, or secretly complicit, were unknown. It had even gotten to the point that Jean Noble Consort and the emperor ate a dish of fish tongues at dinner, requiring 500 fish just to make one plate, while the small palace maid who had newly joined the imperial kitchen was so hungry in the middle of the night she had to sneak out to secretly roast sweet potatoes. Awakened by the glow and noise of the fire, I still had a moment of panic, thinking I had returned to the battlefield of Xiangliang. Without thinking, I blurted out a single word, "Father." Fu Bao quickly dressed me and threw a cloak over my shoulders, pulling me to run outside. I did not know when Fu Bao had become capable of handling everything. There was a slight sadness in my heart. Fortunately, my palace always kept itself fully prepared. The palace servants quickly put out the fire. I stood outside Shuyue residence in my cloak waiting. Seeing Fu Bao's lips had turned purple from the cold, I handed my own hand warmer to her. I thought to myself, I must marry Fu Bao off. Fu Bao was just about to refuse the hand warmer. Her eyes shifted from worried to astonished as she looked at me. I was facing Fu Bao when I was suddenly pulled from behind into a warm embrace. "Zixing, are you all right?" Shinduo, panting, asked. My acquaintance with Shinduo had begun because he had beaten Yuzirwei. At the time Yuzirwei was 7 years old, truly the most mischievous age. Even I had wanted to beat him 3 times a day. But he was my younger brother. The fact that I could beat him did not mean others were permitted to beat him. Yuzirwei felt embarrassed and snuck home to find medicine for his injuries. He was discovered by Yu Xiling, and the matter spread throughout the entire household. The reaction of my younger brothers was just like mine, after the satisfaction wore off. Immediate outrage. Who dared beat a member of our Yu family? Cleverly, Shinduo had not only hit him, not long after, he had brazenly come to our household to celebrate my great-uncle's birthday. When I met him, he was being ambushed by my brothers. They planned to use the chaos to ambush him. Shinduo, trapped in a net of thorns, looked at me through the coarse mesh of the net. I smiled beautifully at him. Then I turned and pretended not to see anything and walked away. And so Shinduo was beaten by my brothers until his face and nose were swollen and bruised. On the day I led my brothers to the Shin household to apologize, Shining was magnanimous and waved it off. Children fighting. Whoever has the ability wins. I cannot blame your brothers. Shinduo, still bearing a body full of injuries, came forward before his father and said, "It was this son who was in the wrong first. The brothers of the Yu family cannot be blamed." No sooner had his father walked away than Shinduo, who was a head taller than Yuzirwei, immediately changed his expression. "You all wait, this matter is not over." And so Shinduo and my brothers, at gatherings throughout the capital, had ambushed and attacked each other repeatedly for an entire year. Wins and losses were equal. Fighting back and forth like this, Shinduo had somehow become sworn brothers with my troublemaker brothers. The feelings between men, truly strange. The feelings between men and women seemed rather more logical. What I mean to say is, exactly, amid those repeated visits to the Shin household to apologize, and then receiving Shinduo back at our household for his apologies, I had developed feelings for Shinduo. And as for Shinduo, the second time he came to our household, he secretly said to me, "Mimi, look at where Yuzirue got beaten yesterday. I deliberately made them into the shape of peach blossoms. When you were putting medicine on him, could you see? Weren't they beautiful?" I replied, "Do you believe I can paint a landscape of mountains and rivers onto your body?" Shinduo, tall and imposing. Features handsome, with a smile revealing gleaming white teeth, both striking and somehow also a little dim-witted. "Mimi, look at this, doesn't it really resemble the wound on Yuzirue?" He pulled from inside his chest a compact of cosmetic powder shaped like a peach blossom. It truly did look just like the shape of the wound on Yuzirue. Shinduo is a pretty good fighter too. Not quite. In truth, at that time I had already begun discussing marriage. Father was a loyal minister who gave his life for the country. Mother was a great calligraphy master. Great uncle held military power. Whether on the maternal or paternal side, both were distinguished aristocratic families. Furthermore, I had inherited a substantial fortune from my father. Father and grandmother had left me with so much. Even if my comet reputation had spread far and wide, there were still many who came to the Yu household with proposals. My great-uncle, though rough, did not mean he was not smart. Without intelligence, how could one become Grand General? The person my great-uncle wanted to match me with was the heir of a great family. This way, whether for me or for the Yu family, there would be advantages. Upon learning this, Shinduo had used Yuzirue to pass me a message. "Mimi, if you nod at the third watch of the night, I will come with betrothal gifts at the fifth watch to propose." But I had refused. It was an embarrassing necessity. The Shin family for generations had served as commanders of the Imperial Golden Guard, their entire lives devoted to a single task: protecting the emperor. Think about it, commander of the Imperial Golden Guard, the person who protects the emperor, forming a marriage alliance with the household of the Grand General who holds major military power. How could the emperor sleep easy? Shinduo told me, "The world is vast. Where is there no place to live? We will roam the world together. No one will ever find us." And then abandon his bedridden great-uncle with 2 crippled legs and my great-uncle living in fear, leave them to bear the endless suspicion of the imperial family? I returned the compact of cosmetic powder Shinduo had given me. "We each have our own paths we must walk. I am sorry, that was the only time I hated my own clarity of mind." After returning home, Shinduo had created a great scene and announced he would not inherit the position of commander of the Imperial Golden Guard. Shining had perhaps guessed the reason and directly sent him off to the northern D frontier to train, thinking the wind and snow there would be sufficient to calm him down. Afterward he had eventually still become commander of the Imperial Golden Guard. And I still had to marry someone else. Outside Shuyue residence, he held me, panting. His heartbeat was like war drums. It seemed that after years of wandering the frontier, the wind and snow had not managed to extinguish the fire in his heart. He said, "Mimi, do not be afraid." Yet clearly the one trembling from fear was him. Seeing that some palace servants wanted to approach, Fubao immediately shouted, "Nyang Nyang has fainted. Commander Shen, please support Nyang Nyang a moment." These words from Fubao, at once reminding him and reminding me, Shuyue residence was currently in chaos. Shinduo coming to help put out the fire was acceptable. But if he stayed long, it would be discovered. I had been in his arms for 5 breaths. That was enough. one cannot be greedy. I am fine. Shenduo, in the palace there is a fire, everywhere is in chaos. You should deploy the Imperial Golden Guard to protect the Emperor. Looking at him, Yu Zixing, Mimi, look at me just once. I would not look. With my back to him. Tears slipped from the corners of my eyes. I tried hard to control myself not to turn my head around. I have always, I know, you need not say it. Shenduo was behind me. It is good that you came. I was very happy. When you left, I was very worried. The compact of cosmetic powder from that year that you gave me, I liked it very much. Shenduo, you should let me go now. It is not fair to you. Your life is not only me. But Mimi, you are the finest person I have ever met. I took Fu Bao's hand and returned to Shuyue residence. Did not look back at him even once. The next day, when Shuyue residence had a fire, the emperor did not come to visit me. He only sent inner attendants with many gifts for reassurance. And simultaneously lifted the house arrest decree and told me to temporarily move to the neighboring palace chambers while Shuyue residence was being repaired. The eunuch leading the group was blocked right outside the door by Fu Bao. Noble consort Gi Nyangnyang, you are here defying the imperial decree. This palace should properly have gone in person to ask the emperor. But last night I was exposed to smoke. My body is not well and it is inconvenient to appear before the emperor. Then let me trouble you to ask on behalf of this palace. This palace was punished for poorly managing the rear palace in the Sima Jiayu incident, had the right to manage the rear palace stripped, and was confined for several months. Now the person managing is Jean Noble Consort. A fire in the palace, compared to a mishap in the food supply, is far more serious. May I ask how the emperor plans to handle this? The eunuch looked at me with an expression of utter disbelief. Noble consort Gi Nyangnyang, the palace maid who started the fire was apprehended last night. She has already been beaten to death. This palace asks about the treatment of the person in charge of managing the rear palace. The eunuch dared not answer. If the emperor cannot fairly and clearly reward and punish, can it be that only this rear palace is in chaos? If this palace does not receive the emperor's answer, this palace will absolutely not take a single step out of Shuyue residence, and absolutely not eat a grain of rice or drink a single sip of water. Having said this, I turned and returned to Shuyue residence. That day the emperor must have been in a thunderous rage. He sent 5 or 6 eunuchs in succession to Shuyue residence to rebuke me. Nothing but, does not keep to wifely conduct, without virtue and integrity, jealous and resentful, repeated again and again, utterly tedious. That day the emperor also feasted with Jean Noble Consort, seemingly completely unaffected by me. But Jean Noble Consort had invited Xu Fei, Xian Fei, and Xu Taining along with all the higher-ranked concubines, and not a single one came. The emperor, furious, sent people to invite Xu Fei and Xu Taining. Xu Fei demurred on grounds of poor health. Xian Fei, dressed in plain unadorned cloth, came to the banquet, removed all her hairpins, and performed a full grand salutation before the emperor. Your Majesty, forgive this consort. This consort has no wish to dine with troublemakers of the rear palace. Xian Fei, after years of suffering in silence, had finally directly confronted the emperor once. The emperor must have been sitting on coals. The Yusher Terrace overnight submitted many memorials, scolding Jean Noble Consort, scolding the Jingyang Marquis, scolding Hong Kong County Princess, and in oblique terms scolding the emperor. Xian Fei also began fasting, just like me. Jean noble consort dared not continue showing off. She hurriedly ended the banquet and returned to her own palace, holding her child and weeping to the emperor. After the Yusher terrace finished scolding the great families, they continued scolding. How is Jean noble consort your beloved daughter while noble consort Gui's daughter is mere grass? Noble consort Guy, descended from an eternally loyal grand general's household. Her father even dying in battle with his body never intact. Now her palace has been burned, and not even a single word of justice is given. Among those, particularly the Han family who scolded most passionately, old Master Han kept scolding in court, back and forth, to the point where he nearly fainted. Yet people did not dare let him faint, for with the constitution of the Han family, if he fainted he would easily lose his life. If he had any ill fortune, the emperor would certainly be labeled a muddle-headed sovereign. My great-uncle, at this moment his acting skills suddenly exploded. This cannot be blamed on the emperor. The emperor is a good emperor. Nothing like this ever happened before. Everyone see for yourselves, is that not right? We must trust the emperor to handle it fairly. The emperor then took the pretext of poor health to rest from court for 3 days. The result, the moment he had just returned to the rear palace, another great incident occurred. The eldest princess was beaten to death by her own palace maid. When the eldest princess was born, Xu Fei was only a small concubine, and moreover the empress had no children. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.